Hello everyone and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei Derby Eliezer. So we are in chapter 48. This is 48G, and this one is called Let It Go. Halu et Adonai kol goim, shabechu kol ha'umim, ki gavar elenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai le'olam, hallelujah. We're picking up, obviously, where we left off last week. Rabbi Akiva says, Pharaoh's taskmasters would beat Israel to pressure them into making bricks, as said in Exodus 5:8. But the number of bricks they have been making yesterday and the day before yesterday you shall impose upon them, you shall not reduce it, for they are lax. Therefore they cry out, saying, Let us go and sacrifice to our God. But Egypt did not give the stubble for making bricks to Israel, as said in Exodus 5:16. Stubble is not given to your servants, but they tell us, Make bricks, and behold, your servants are beaten, and your people are sinning. From this section of Pirkei Derby Eliezer, we're going to get an inside perspective as to what this might have looked like. In other words, not just reading about it, just what was going on within the families over there. Israel would trample the stubble in the wilderness. This is what it says, meaning out in the fields and all the lands over there, outside the city limits. They would trample it with their donkeys, their wives, with their sons and daughters. All right? It got to a point where the entire family, and even the family donkey, had to go to work over there. Otherwise, you would get beaten sometimes to death. In other words, we have to do this or we're going to die. The bottom line was this. They worked them so hard to the point, like we said in previous teachings, that they could not think of anything else, not for a minute, let alone cultivate any kind of relationship with God. And again, this is what Pharaoh knew. The famous question is, why did Moses tell Pharaoh, let us go out for 3 days, just 3 days? And Pharaoh's like, no, I know these people. The moment I get my knee out from their throat and they're free, just for a moment, Jews automatically get that connection with God. And the moment they connect with God, they're going to realize that this whole thing is one big farce. I will have no more power. You get it, people? Maybe it's time to wake up. Okay, just that one moment of silence, you would be surprised what that'll do. So the bottom line was that they worked them so hard, like we said, to the point where they couldn't cultivate any relationship with God. They had to work in order to live, just to make it through the day. Nowadays, at least in Israel, most people have to work month to month. Soon it's going to get to the point where it's week to week. And in the not-so-distant future, it might just come down to a day-to-day basis. This is in accordance with with what the Torah tells us. What was is what will be, especially when it comes to the necessary squeezing before the final redemption. And as they, entire families would trample upon the straw and stubble, it would pierce their heels and their feet, and their blood would mix in with the mortar. So we know that they were barefoot, and we know that the reasons they bled is because of the very rough terrain, which included rocks, thorns, and thistles. Now, I think the term blood, sweat, and tears, I don't know, maybe it came from down here. Who knows? Okay, and Rachel, the daughter of Shutelach, was pregnant and was about to give birth. As she was trampling the mortar with her husband, as her child exited her womb and fell right into the mortar mix, and her screams were what ascended before the throne of glory. In other words, there is that breaking point, the straw, that broke the back, get it? Okay. Anyway, so it's a tough story, I know, but this subject is focused on the word for bricks in Hebrew, levenim, okay? That's what they were called to make. Levenim. Within this word, we have a few other words of great significance. Levenim, bricks. Lebanim, same exact word, same exact spelling, except there's a dot inside the bet. Bet with a dot, vet without a dot, right? Means with sons. Banim, sons. Lavan, white. White, bricks, sons. Get it? Okay. Also, to build. Livnot, a structure or building, binyan, levenim, binyan, livnot, bricks, buildings, all these things are like pretty much the same root. Hebrew. It's a good language. There is a holy side to this as well as an unholy side. The holy side is obviously a reference to the sons of God, who build his kingdom through following his commands. Every mitzvah that we do, we lay another metaphorical layer, spiritual layer of brick, which would be the third temple. Okay, the third temple is basically built by the mitzvot that we do. The flip side are the builders with evil intent, to oppose and fight God. And these from the days of old till this day are called Habonim, the builders, who are free. Free of what? Of God. Freemasons. Get it? Okay. As in free from God's commands. Their origin is that from the Tower of Babel. We will see that all the way back then until Egypt and then until today. Genesis 11:3. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and fire them thoroughly." Vayomu ish el re'ehu. Re'eh, when someone is a re'i, is my close, they said to one another, but re'eh is like a comrade, like my brother from another mother type of situation. That's how close they were in their desire to what? Nilbena levenim. We will build bricks. Or you could also say nilbena levenim, we will make bricks white. Venisrefa lisrefa, and we will fire them thoroughly, how it's translated. Vatehi lahem, so the bricks were to them for stones, it says, and the clay was to them for mortar. Vatehi lahem halevena, levena is a brick in single tense, le'avin, as a stone, vehachemar haya lehem lachomer. Chemar is mortar or clay, chomer is material. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city." Vayamu hava nivne lanu. But it's not only ourselves for ourselves, like lech lecha, go for you. Nivne lanu, for us. We will do this for us, not only for ourselves, for us. Ir umigdal verosho bashamayim. A city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make ourselves a name. V'naseh lanu shem, a name for us. Pen nafutz al pnei kol haaretz, lest we be scattered upon the face of the entire earth. We know why they were building. These were the original builders. These were the original masons who chose to be free of God's command. They're still around. Now, I say this because this story from Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer has been written in Targum Yonatan ben Uziel. Fascinating. Like we said, he translated the entire Torah into prophecy, minus the book of Daniel. He received warning from heaven. That is when there is the actual date of the time of the end. Please watch that video, which has been revealed on Calling All Jews. And look what he says regarding what was written for the holy bricks of sapphire from Exodus 24, 9-10. And Moses and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, and the 70 elders of Israel ascended, and they perceived the God of Israel, and beneath his feet was like the form of a sapphire brick and like the appearance of the heavens for clarity. Poor translation. But let's read his translation. And Moshe and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up. They ascended. And Nadav and Avihu lifted up their eyes and saw the glory of the God of Israel, and under the footstool of his feet, which was placed beneath his throne, was like the work of sapphire stone, a memorial of the servitude with which the Mitzrai, he wrote in Aramaic, Egyptian, had made the children of Israel to serve in clay and bricks. One time there were women treading clay with their husbands. The delicate young woman with child was also there. He's alluding to what we just read. And made abortive, in other words, she lost a child right there by being beaten down with the clay. And thereof did Gabriel, descending, make brick, and going up to the heavens on high, set it, a footstool under the cathedra of the Lord of the world, whose splendor was at the work of the precious stone, and as the power of the beauty of the heavens when they are clear from clouds. So the blood of the innocent is a very, very powerful thing over here. These are the highest souls who chose to come down to this world for the purpose of dying for God's namesake. Also, that's why it says the plague of frogs. Why was it so? It was considered the one that actually held the most weight because the frogs actually jumped into the furnace. They were not commanded to jump into the furnace. They chose to do that, right? Again, if you read about David and his and the Psalms of the universe, the songs of the universe, David was contending with the frog, and David could not. David, the sweet singer of Zion, could not contend with the frog because the frog is like, listen, I chose to die for God. Every day He creates me anew, and I go and I get fed to something else. In other words, I'm giving my life for God's namesake, for the song of the universe. So this is what we see over here. These are the highest souls who chose to come down for the world for the purpose of dying for God's namesake. Not only are they innocent, but they are blameless. And these are the children, right? No sin can come upon a child until the age of mitzvah, 12 or 13 for a girl and for a boy. They are on a higher level than the righteous, for they have never sinned, while even the righteous have sinned. Of course, even a person who is, it says, perfectly righteous still does not live life perfectly. If you have one thought for a split second that is anything but focused on God and His Torah and His name, it's considered a sin, not in the traditional, oh, how dare you. Every day we do tshuva. That's why tshuva exists, right? We discuss this. The world could not exist until God implemented the aspect of tshuva as part of creation, as part of how everything works. So, a kid up until the age of 12 or 13, blameless, sinless, like an angel. In fact, if you see a kid like this who was raised in a good home, ask them for a blessing. It will count for something. Okay, so who was this Rachel that we read about? The daughter of Tushelach. His name is mentioned in the book of Numbers 26, 35 to 36. These were the descendants of Ephraim. According to their families, the families of Shutelahites, Letushelach, the Tushelach family, from Shutela, the family of Bachrites, from Becher, the family of Tachanites, from Tachan. Okay, and these were the descendants of Shutelach, Le'eran Mishpachat Erani, the family of the Aaronites from Iran. So we see they're actually mentioned. These are real people, and this was an instance that happened, and Gabriel brought that before God, which is when the cry actually said, okay, Adkan. And again, they are mentioned in 1 Chronicles 7, 20 to 24. And the sons of Ephraim, Shutelach, and Bered his son, and Tachash his son, and Eladah his son, and Tachash his son. So it gives us a lineage all the way down, and Zavad his son, and Shutelach his son, and Ezer and Elad, and the men of Gath, the native of the land, slew them because they came down to their cattle. And Ephraim their father mourned for them many days, and his brothers came to console him. And he went to his wife, and she conceived and bore a son, and named him Beriah with an ayin, not Briah with an aleph, which is creation, Beriah, because during a time of trouble she was in his house. And his daughter was She'era Vataven, et Beit Choron atachton ve'et ha'elyon ve'et uzon She'era. So the way it's translated and the way it's actually written, these are two completely different things, and we need the way that it is written because it alludes to what actually happened. Okay, Ubito, his daughter, She'era Vataven. What is Tavin? Tevin. That's the straw that was used, and his daughter was She'era, and she built. Livnot, Vataven is the biblical way of saying, and she built, right? But Tevin is the very material. So in other words, it's kind of alluding to it in English, but it also kind of loses it. All right. So the men of Gath were the Philistines, who almost wiped out the tribe of Ephraim, as we know, when they left early from Egypt. They left 30 years early from Egypt because they started the 400-year countdown from where Abraham received the prophecy, as opposed to starting it from when the prophecy was going to kick in, which is Abraham's descendants, meaning the birthday of Isaac, right? They left 30 years early, and they almost got completely wiped out. And it was because of their move. Specifically, our text says that Egypt turned up the heat against Israel even more, meaning in those last 30 years out of those 86 years of bitterness, those last 30 years were crazy. And even the last 3 months after Moses showed up, and then Pharaoh's like, oh, wait, right? Those last 3 months, that was it. But then that was it. So it was because of their move that Egypt turned up the heat against Israel. Now, why does our text name the woman Rachel? Rachel, in Hebrew, Rachel, phonetically sounds like Ruach El, the Spirit of God. Rachel Ruach El, okay? Also known as the Shekhinah. One of the names for the Shekhinah is Rachel. In the Zohar, Rachel is another name for the Shekhinah, as we read in Jeremiah 31:14. So says the Lord, a voice is heard on high, lamentation, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, the Shekhinah weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children, for they are not. What do we read in our text? And her screams were what ascended before the throne of glory. That's what did it. So in other words, not only this person, Rachel, is a representative of the Shekhinah, Ruach El, Rachel. And there is nothing that moves God like the cries of a mother over her children, like the Shekhinah crying over her children, Israel, who have been beaten, tortured, and murdered over and over again for almost 2,700 years. And it was these cries that caused the redemption of Israel to begin. Now, look at how our text continues. And the angel Michael descended and took the brick and mortar and brought it before the throne of glory. Michael came down, brought it up. Now, in some places it says Gabriel, like Rabbi Yonatan ben Uziel says, but here in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer it says Michael. Okay, so an archangel brought it before God. Yippee. It's good stuff. In other words, like here in the Zohar, it says Michael. Okay, Rabbi Yonatan says Gabriel. And that same night, the Holy and Blessed be He revealed Himself and smote all the firstborn sons of Egypt. Wait a minute, timeline's off. Is it? Wait. As said in Exodus 12:29, it came to pass at midnight, and the Lord smote every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive, who is in the dungeon, and every firstborn animal. So like we said, what is the question we should be asking? How could it be that on the same night, that all this took place on the same night, if all of Israel had to be in their homes? Why? Because they were celebrating the Pesach. That was Leil HaSeder, the night of order. Be in your homes, put the blood on the doorways, do not come out. And yet, it was that night that this woman was treading upon the straw? So, good question. Let's answer it. The answer is that it was indeed the same night, only a year prior, you see. And what, pray tell, happened exactly 1 year prior to the Exodus, likely the very same night that this instance happened, that the child went straight from its mother's womb directly to the mortar, and that was brought before the Holy One, blessed be He. What happened right there 1 year exactly before? Here's the cry, Exodus 2:23-25. Now it came to pass in those days, in those many days, that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed from labor, and they cried out, and their cry ascended to God from the labor. God heard their cry, and God remembered His covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God saw the children of Israel, and God knew. And here is the answer from the very next verse, Exodus 3:1-2. Moses was pasturing the flocks of Jethro, his father-in-law, the chief of Midian, and he led the flocks after the free pasture land, and he came to the mountain of God, to Horeb. Like we said, the entire story of everything that was going to take place is in this one verse, Exodus 3:1, exactly what was going to happen. An angel of the Lord appeared to him in the flame of fire from within the thorn bush, and behold, the thorn bush was burning with fire, but the thorn bush was not being consumed. We have a whole class about that, how it was a miracle within a miracle, and yet within another miracle. The only way there could be a thorn bush on the top of that mountain is if there was water, and yet it's rooted in water. There was a pool of water, and within the pool of water, the bush was on fire. You see, and the bush, so the water the fire wasn't being doused by the water, and the bush wasn't being consumed by the fire. Great stuff. So the Redeemer was called exactly 1 year to the day before the Exodus. That's when that happened. Now going back to where it said, it came to pass at midnight. The Holy One, blessed be He, said, if I take out Israel at night, the Egyptians will say that I had done this in the way of thieves at night, but rather I shall take them out in the midday with the might of the sun. As said in Exodus 12:51. It came to pass on that very day that the Lord took the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt with their legions. Be'etzim hayom hazeh, in the middle of this day, midnight, midday. These are auspicious times, both day and night. Meaning in the middle of the day, of the 12 hours of light versus the 12 hours of darkness. Where did the other half of the night go? This goes back to Abraham when he fought and destroyed the 4 armies. Genesis 14:14-15. And Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, and he armed his trained men, those born in his house, 318, and pursued them until Dan. And he divided himself against them at night. Vayechalek alehem laila. That's what it says in Hebrew. Listen to the Hebrew. Vayechalek, divided, alehem, upon them, laila, night. That's it. The other half of this night was held for Exodus 12:30. Vayakam paro laila, where it says, and Pharaoh arose at night. No. And he arose, Pharaoh, night. That's how it says. Vaychalek alehem laila, vayakam paro laila. That's the first half of the night. That's when the second half of the night was reserved for the Makat Bechorot, thanks to Abraham also. And all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great outcry in Egypt, for there was no house in which no one was dead. Abraham had everything to do with the Exodus, but the Exodus and turning Israel into a mighty nation could not have happened if they were not in Egypt. The descent was very necessary. Egypt represents 9/10 of the world's impurity, while Jerusalem received 9/10 of the world's splendor. The ancient borders of the land of Egypt, if you know anything about what I'm about to say, it's very cool. The ancient borders of the land of Egypt were 400 parsah over 400 parsah, a perfect square. That's roughly 1,460 square kilometers. And it just so happens that the borders of Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem, are exactly the same measurements. You see, they're polar opposites, purity, impurity. The 4 kings represent the 4 exiles, while the exodus from Egypt is the prototype for the final redemption. Now that the night is taken care of, the first redemption from Egypt, like the final redemption, will be done with maximum exposure. Not at night. Did you hear? No. Everyone is going to witness this for all the world to see. And the time for that is when the light shines the brightest, meaning midday. When the sun is directly above in the sky, then there's no shadows, right? If it's anywhere to the side, wherever you're at, there's going to be shadows. But when the sun is directly in the center of the sky, no shadows, no darkness, no shadows in any direction, meaning the darkness and anywhere it hides is gone. There's nowhere to hide because you cannot hide in the shadows, leaving no room for doubt by whose hand were the Israelites brought out of Egypt. So it was, and so it will be. So what happened between the 12 hours from midnight to midday? At midnight, they were released by Pharaoh, who tried to rush them out, but they left when all could see 12 hours later. And so, verse 51, it came to pass on that very day that the Lord took the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt with their legions. The legions being the heavenly hosts, right? The ministering angels and the 12 tribes of Yah. Everyone, the legions descended with Israel to Egypt, and they were also coming out together. That's when the hold was actually lifted. Once the powers in the heavens are broken, Israel can go free. And so they did. Rabbi Yehuda says that the whole night that Israel were eating, drinking wine, and being happy, They were praising the Holy One, blessed be He, with a great voice. This is where we get the 4+1 cups of wine. This is where we get the Hallel in the Seder from. Hallel, hallelujah, lehalel is praise, right? So this is what they were doing. While the Egyptians were screaming in bitterness because of the plague, the death of the firstborn. That happened upon them suddenly, as said in Exodus 12:30. And Pharaoh rose at night, or Pharaoh vayakam paro laila, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great outcry in Egypt, for there was no house in which no one was dead. Why was this one called a plague specifically? Because in Exodus 12:23, it said, "The Lord will pass to smite the Egyptians, and he will see the blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts." And by the way, this is not in the shape of a chet. It was specifically, they had to write a hey, the letter hey. So there's a separation. In other words, the top, the bottom on the right post, and then on the left post, you have to keep that gap over there if you want to draw the letter hey. That's what they did on the door. And and that's also the difference between chametz and matzah. Chametz and matzah, the difference is the hey and the chet. Chametz, no good. With the chet, no chet. Hey, matzah, boom, there you go. The Lord will pass to smite the Egyptians, and he will see the blood on the lintel and 2 doorposts, and the Lord will pass over the entrance, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses to smite you. Now, the word says, lavo el batechem lingof, to smite you, lingof, negif, right? But lingof from the word magefa, plague. In other words, this actually was a plague. Va'avar Adonai lingof et Mitzrayim. The Lord will pass, it says to smite, but actually to plague Egypt. That happened, and it's funny because they're called the makot. In English, you translate the 10 makot as the 10 plagues, but here specifically, it's called a plague and not the other ones, which are called makot. Okay, so that happened upon them suddenly. What's this? This is self-explanatory. As 1 minute they were all alive, and the next minute, every last firstborn of Egypt, from man to beast, dropped dead. Now, you need to understand, there was almost no such thing as only one person per house dropping dead. This was mass casualties. If you read Rashi 12:30, regarding, for there was no house in which no one was dead, he says the following. If there was a firstborn there, he died, obviously. If there was no firstborn there, then the chief person in the house died, because the chief person in the house is called Bechol, meaning the next oldest person was called Bechol, as it says in Psalms 89:28. I will also appoint him to be a Bechol, the highest of the kings of the earth. This is Mechilta de Rashbi 12:30, and Rashi says in 4:22, Masechet Psachim Rabbah. These are the sources, right? Furthermore, Rashi continues, the Egyptian women were such harlots, though they had husbands, they bore children from young men, unmarried, and thus they, the Egyptian men, had many firstborn sons. Sometimes there were 5 to 1 woman, each being the firstborn to his own father. Thus there was no house in which there was not a firstborn. Each woman, 5 different baby daddies. You see what I'm saying? Now, think about this for a moment, okay? This is how they lived, and they were the epitome of impurity, of tum'ah, of disgustingness. This is how they lived. Let's bring us to today's climate. So like we said, it was because of their behavior that caused Egypt to be abominable that God destroyed them. The society was so corrupt, so filthy, so out of control, all Israel had to do to be saved was to not be like them. Just don't be like them, and you'll be fine. Just don't be like them. Remember, Egypt, the world's greatest superpower at the time. Now let's fast forward about 4,000 years or 3,500 years to the new Egypt, the new leading superpower in the world. And again, just please pay attention, all right? This is to be discussed openly, at least from the right side of the table. We're not talking about race here. We're talking about behavior, okay? Okay, wherever this may be. When there is no father in the home, when the mother continues to have children, Without two responsible, caring, and loving parents to educate the child, the kids grow up to become, for lack of a better word, Egyptians. You have an entire culture today that encourages this. Not through direct enforcement, of course not, but through every other means that would not only make the individual not think about their actions and consequences thereof, but as a result of setting up this very system, the individual is encouraged to act in this manner. No education, no discipline, receiving money from the government for every child born out of wedlock. Why not? I'll just pop out a few more kids. I'll get the kesef. Really. Handouts, which discourage even trying. And this cycle goes on and on and on. Look at the governments that give out free handouts. Why would I work if I get things for free? You see? Okay. And then you rely on the government and so on and so forth. It's a loop. People aren't seeing it, but some people see it. But in any case, what you get is a broken society who is eating itself while also receiving judgment from God for this behavior. So who's at fault here? Everyone is at fault here. No one is making anyone do anything. Those who laid the system in place and those who refuse to think for themselves, taking what the government who laid this corrupt system to begin with. Do you understand how messed up this is? It is a cycle, and it's still happening. And so I say again, there's only one way that Israel were saved, and that is they did not live the way the Egyptians lived. We do not do as they do. Now look what our text says. By the merit of these three things did Israel leave Egypt. 1, they did not change their names nor their tongue. Okay? They never forgot who they were and where they came from, and they did not try to emulate or become Egyptian by any means. To the contrary, they really just wanted to be left alone. They understood that the moment that they would start speaking like the Egyptians, not only their language, but taking their slang, their mannerisms, and what have you, would decrease from their Jewishness, so to speak. And before you know it, yeah, I'm an Egyptian Jew. You see, those were the 80% who didn't leave. Not because they necessarily took this on, but because they felt comfortable being Israelites in Egypt. That's not how this works. 2, they did not speak evil speech or slander one another. They didn't go to the authorities to start ratting each other out, except for 2 individuals like we discussed. As we're on the topic of speech, again, behold the power of the tongue. One of the reasons they were protected is because there were no quarrels in between the Israelites, meaning there was peace. And when there is peace between people, even if they are idolaters, God will not seek retribution. But the moment that peace becomes murder, robbery, slander, or anything else where man harms his fellow man, that's where severe judgment will be dealt. Not only for the last straw, but for everything that God withheld to begin with for the sake of peace. In other words, okay, you're at peace. The points are being racked up against you right now for all the idolatry you're doing. That's not wiped clean. Just the judgment is being delayed. But the moment that comes, it all comes crashing down. Okay? We see it in the generations of the flood, Sodom and Gomorrah, the idolatrous kingdom of Ahab and others. Where there is peace, no touching. But the moment Vatimale haaretz chamas, and the earth got filled with robbery, all of a sudden, all that fornication and all that other stuff that you did, now here we go. The floodgates are open. 3, they unified the name of God. They did not worship idols. How does one unify the name of God? We do it every day when we say the Shema, right? Just like the children of Israel said to their father upon his deathbed, when he warned them not to leave God. They say, oh, hear, O Israel, our father, right? Dad. The Lord is our God because we chose him, and because we chose him to be and will choose him again on Mount Sinai. We chose God to be our God, and on Mount Sinai, again, we say Naseh v'nishma. The Lord is one, alluding again to Mount Sinai and the first two commandments spoken from the mouth of God himself. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. That's it. Lo yelecha Elohim acharim al panai. No other Elohim, only God. Just so you know, in the Mechilta, it gives four things as to what happened. The fourth being sexual purity. Though they, of course, kept the laws of ritual purity, which is one of the cornerstones of every Jewish home due to the fact that Egypt was so filthy and impure. It was around them all the time. It was in the air. It was on the ground. Again, it says that the air in the land of Israel is machkima, gives you chokhmah, gives you wisdom. The air outside the land of Israel, metamtemet, it makes you dumb. I didn't say this, the sages did, but God says this is the Holy Land. So by default, any land that is not holy is impure, unholy. All right, nothing is gray over here. It's black and white. Okay, so like we said, though they kept the laws of ritual purity, one of the cornerstones of every Jewish home, Egypt was so filthy and impure, it was around them all the time. So for that fact, it's not mentioned in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Nevertheless, it's true just the same. They kept sexual purity and ritual purity. These four corresponded to the four-letter name of God that was revealed to Moses, the Yud Kei Vav Kei. And the last of the letters, the letter Hey, was given to them when they did the Pesach. So they kept all of these, and Israel went out of Egypt filled with goodness and all kinds of blessings, exactly how God said it would happen to Abraham in Genesis 15:14. And also the nation that they will serve I will judge, and afterwards they will go forth with great possessions. And as David later said in Psalms 105, 42-43, for he remembered his holy word with Abraham, his servant, and he took out his people with joy, his chosen ones with joyful singing. This is the direct correlation between Abraham and, you see this. Okay. Israel. Our actions are what separate us from the nations. And Israel, we've been given God's name, and that's what actually keeps us. And we have to remember that, right? Unifying the name of God. This is unifying us as well. Israel, through the name that he gave us, Yashar El. God is straight. And every day that we live this, that we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, we draw nearer to him, while the nations pull further away because we want nothing to do with God. We want to live we want to live in this world the way we want to live in this world. That's okay. You build your towers, we're going to go with God, and we're going to see what's going to happen in the end. The only way any among the nations could be saved, now listen up, if that's you, is if they did not partake in the oppression of Israel and help them whenever they could. Not everyone in Egypt was an Egyptian, right? It was like you're in New York today, the melting pot of everything. And so why did they have to lose their firstborn sons? Why did they go through that same struggle? Because when the Egyptians were oppressing us, not only did they do nothing, but they were gleeful about it. And so their end was like their end. Same thing. Look today in the world, privately, publicly, wherever, nations, individuals, anybody that takes a stance against Jews. I'm not talking about the state of Israel. Like we said in the truth about Zionism, there are so many different layers to this and people have no idea what they're saying. Those people are anti-Semites. Make no mistake saying, I got no problem with Israel. With Jews, I got a problem with this. Yes, you do. It's one and the same. You're not going to get away from this. God knows exactly who's what. All right? But anybody that takes a stance against Jews, they have very big problems, okay? And we will see them. It's going to be a public judgment. So, as far as Israel goes, we were not called to be heroes, not called to do anything extraordinary, but we were called to be extraordinary. The way this is done is to detach from this world, detach from the mainstream, from the norm, and we're going to see what happens. We have the instructions. We need but follow them. grab a hold of God, okay, and let go of the world, or go down with it. So just, let it go. All right. So thus concludes chapter 48. We're done in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Next week, God willing, we will start chapter 49. As always, thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and have a Shabbat Shalom.